Good day everyone, this is Mark Jestony B. Good together with my co-presenter Sairaj Zoleta of BACE 1C Group 4. In the previous discussion, they talk about global cities. As noted on that lesson, are sites and mediums of globalization. In today's pre-recorded video, we will tackle about the global demography. So for the learning objectives today, at the end of this discussion, you should be able to discuss the relationship between population and economic welfare, identify the effects of aging and overpopulation, and last but not the least, differentiate between contrasting positions over reproductive health. So, since we are talking about global demography, it is necessary to define demography. So what do we mean about demography? The word demography comes from the root word demo and graphy. So when we say demo means people and when we say graphy means measurement. So literally speaking, my fellow learners, it's the measurement of people. To be exact, demography is the statistical study of human populations. So it examines the size, structure, and movements of populations over space and time. Okay? When couples are asked why they have children, their answers are almost always about their feelings. Agree or disagree? I bet most of you will agree, diba? Try to ask your parents or married couples, bakit kayo nagkaanak? Bakit kayo may anak? Siyempre, nagmamahalan sila sa isa't isa at ang kanilang anak ang bunga ng kanilang pagmamahalan. Diba? For most, having a children is a symbol of successful union. It also ensures that the family will have a successor generation that will continue its name. Diba there are always some couples, especially when they are just starting to build their family name, na ang mindset nila is to continue the succession of their family, na ang end goal is to preserve the family kinship and the story of the family continues. However, there are few who worry how much strain a child can bring to the household as he or she competes for the parents' attention and how much energy the family needs to shower its love to an additional member. But you know what? Scenario like this is very rare lang naman and hindi naman siya very common because most of us when we hear news that one member of our clan is pregnant, di ba na-excite man pa na ay bagong member sa atong family, bihira lang yung mindset na yung ano kayang burden ang dala-dala ang batang ito pag lumaki. Maging pabigat ba ito sa atin? Something like that. Anyways, having a child or without a child is mainly driven by economics. Take note for that. So, behind the laughter and tears lie the question, will the child be an economic asset or burden to the family? Kani ba siya na bata kay asset ba siya sa iyang bansa to achieve progress and development or on the other hand, mahimo ba siyang burden sa iyang family at the same time sa sarili niyang bansa?
A family from rural communities would certainly welcome a larger number of offspring, as they often have their income from cultivating land and farming, which requires more workforce, especially during planting and harvesting season. Even in some parts of the urban areas with a lesser income rate, families have more children so as to manage their small family business. Ang reality ani is that magdaghan sila og anak para mas daghan makatinda sa ilang baligya into different locations, which in turn mas dako ang ilang kita to feed each of their family members. And with this makaingon ta that the reasoning is flawed, but that is reality. It has been instilled in the minds of the family in these particular areas nga the more ka magkaanak, mas daghan makatabang sa imo, therefore sharing the burden in the family. Mas daghan chance nga maahon mo sa kahirapan. It's like more entries para more chances of winning. For urbanized, educated, and professional families, example of these are families with income from both parents. They desire to have one or two children only, as they are committed to grow their savings and are inclined to allocate more of their income into healthcare, education, and retirement plan. For these type of families, Ga-invest sila sa future nga welfare sa members with a much clearer and concrete way on how to do that by saving. Majority of these families kay work ang both parents, mama and papa, so they have more of their time sa ilang work. Rural families view multiple children and a large kinship as critical investment in contrast to the basic family unit setting of urban families with a minimum of four family members each family ra. These differing realities in family building is a reflection of the economic and social policies each country crafts with regards to their population. Countries that belong to less developed regions of the world that depends on its agricultural sector expected to maintain high levels of population increase. In comparison, urban population has grown as well, but this is owing to the increasing rate of migration or people seeking opportunities from more advanced parts of the world and is not a result of families having more children. International migration is the movement of people away from their home country and crossing an international border into a country where they are not citizens. This global phenomenon plays a role to the rate of population growth in a specific country. It is recorded that about 191 million people have decided to move to a different country from their own, and the United Nations estimated further that over 2.2 million will eventually move from the developing world into first world countries. This growing rate of migration is attributable to opportunities that people can find sa developed or sa advanced na countries. Sa Philippines, we have 1.77 million OFW. According to the survey by the PSA, wala pay labot ana ang mga Filipinos nga citizens na sa different countries. Those data and only are only for workers, and that is already a lot of people. Next is all about the perils of overpopulation. A country's development can be attributed to the rise in urbanization and industrialization as believed by development planners, but they contradict on the role of population density or the decline in modernization. We can relate this with the ideas of the famous British scholar Thomas Malthus, who wrote the 1978 essay, an essay on the principle of population, warning us of the adverse effects of overpopulation on the global food supply by the middle of the 19th century. It was further supported in the late 1960s by an American biologist, Paul R. Urtek, and his wife Anne, with their published book entitled The Population Bomb, which insisted that the high level of population growth experienced in the 1970s up to the 80s will greatly impact the environment, bringing about natural disasters that would ultimately lead to the exhaustion of food supply and then mass starvation. So the relationship of between overpopulation and food supply is inversely proportional. This is because the more mouth na kinahanglan i-feed and the more necessities na kinahanglan i-satisfy, the more ta magkuha sa natural resources, for example, trees, oil, water supply, which if exhausted, as emphasized by Ertic, would cause environmental disasters until mahurot ang natural resources and what will come next. Of course, food and supply shortage. Not only did Ertic discuss the impending effects of overpopulation, he also suggested a number of ways in which it can be prevented or slowed down, from the unconventional method of chemical castration or the use of chemicals or other medications to inhibit the synthesis of sex hormones, hence reducing libido and sexual activity. And then, the policy-oriented methods such as taxation sa mga anak nga beyond na sa required number of children per family and putting luxury taxes sa mga gamit intended for child use. Another way to control the growth of population is through paying incentives to men who agree to be sterilized after having two children, most commonly referred to as vasectomy. And then there's institution building as well, which encompasses activities designed to modify the processes by which societies are regulated, in this case in terms of family planning. By limiting the population, vital resources could be used for economic progress and not be diverted and wasted to feed more mouths. This reasoning is nahimong fundamental point para sa mga government nga magpatupad og population control programs worldwide. In the mid-20th century, the Philippines together with China and India pursued to lower birth rate in their respective countries. This is because of the assumptions that the continuous increase in the number of family members per household would cause a dilemma in the availability of resources, which will eventually result in worldwide poverty and hunger and political instability. These measures that are taken in order to combat overpopulation and other global issues has been present as early as 1958, when contraception and sterilization were recommended by Foreign Affairs, an American policy journal. And dili lang dira nag-stop ang methods and solution that are eyed by the government and the societies para makontrol ang pagtaas sa population. Groups were also established with advocates that are unyielding in their campaign to give universal access and use of reproductive products and technologies such as condoms, pills, and the support of supporting abortion and vasectomy. This also includes giving women the right to choose whether to have children or not. The sector that has control and can determine these family planning and birth control programs are, of course, in the political sector, the government. These programs are fully supported and enabled by developed countries, which they also encourage nga it's time now for developing countries, which they deemed as conservative societies, to adopt programs and policies for an effective population control. Examples of these are population experts blamed the irresponsible fecundity of Egyptians for the nation's run on population growth, the Iranian peasants' natural libidinal tendencies for the same rise in population, and the Muslims as hypersexual and hyperfecund and hence a drain on resources. The above are examples of conservative societies that was facing problems with high population growth and draining resources because they tend to avoid methods nga related sa pag-change sa practices or beliefs nga preserve ana nga community, which nakita sa mga population experts might be one of the cause of overpopulation. Because of these steps nga gituk sa governments of the developing countries, the information in the existing policies were made. 20 million violators of the one-child policy in China were subjected to forced sterilization. Vietnam and Mexico conducted coercive mass sterilization as well. Finally, gibreak nila ang ilang conservative tendencies and sought new method that would otherwise be never an option to them kay part man sila sa conservative nga communities in order to combat overpopulation.
The next part of the discussion, it is the economy, not the babies. The use of population control to prevent economic crisis has its critics. For example, Bitsy Hartman disagrees with the advocates of neo-Malthusian theory and accused governments of using population control as substitute for social justice and much-needed reforms, such as land distribution, employment, creation, provision of mass education, and healthcare. Okay? So when we say neo-Malthusian or neo-Malthusianism, it refers to the belief that population control through the use of contraception is essential for the survival of the Earth's human population. Okay? But si Bitsy Hartman kay nag-disagree siya sa mga nag-advocate nitong neo-Malthusianism na sinasabi nila na para makontrol ang population na gamit ang pills, condom, etc. Katong unsa tong gipang mention ni Cyrus Gaina, okay? So, others pointed out that the population did grow fast in many countries in the 1960s, and this growth aided economic development by spurring technological and institutional innovation and increasing the supply of human ingenuity. Okay, from this statement, it tells us that the positive impact of population growth. Kumbaga, ang advantage na po sa pagdaghan sa population. So, nagkaroon ng transformation or change when it comes sa technologies, and there were also organization of different institutions. And most importantly, the greater people means more manpower. Kaya sabi ni Saraj kanina na hindi rin advantage kung kukunti ang population sa isang bansa. Okay? Advances in agricultural production have shown that the Malthusian nightmare can be prevented. So dito ko ipapasok si Malthusian theory. Anong meron kang Malthusian theory? You can recall your subject in economics in junior high school. Anong sinasabi sa Malthusian theory? It is a theory that food production will not be able to keep up the growth of human population, resulting in cease of war, violence, and calamity. To make it simple as I can, ang point lang naman ni Malthus dito is the population will grow faster than the supply of the food. Okay? So since there are higher population than the availability of food, many people will die from shortage of food. Mas marami ang population kaysa sa rami ng food supply. But since there were advances in agricultural production, this event will be prevented. So hindi na nangyayari ang ilang ginakahadlukan na mas dadami ang population kaysa sa food supply. So we have here the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution created high-yielding varieties of rice and cereals, and along with the development of the new methods of cultivation increased yields globally, but some particularly in the development world. So when we say Green Revolution, my fellow learners, it means there is a great increase in production of food, grain, especially wheat and rice. As a result of advances of farming and cultivation, so dito nagkakaroon ng iba't ibang varieties of seeds, mga pananim, meron na rin silang ginagamit na fertilizers, mga pesticides in order to reduce agricultural problems. Also, gumagamit na rin sila dito ng latest agricultural machinery such as tractor, seed drills, and iba pang mga gamit sa pagtatanim. Yan ang mga features sa Green Revolution. Therefore, the global famine which Neo-Malthusians predicted did not happen kasi nagkaroon ng Green Revolution, kumbaga nasolusyonan pa rin. Instead, between 1950 and 1984, global grain production increased by over 250%, allowing the agriculture to keep pace with population growth, thereby global famine under control. Nakontrol pa rin nila ang kagutuman o taggutom na kinakatakutan nila na kung saan madami pa ang bilang ng tao kaysa sa bilang ng food supply. Scholars and policymakers agree with the Neo-Malthusians, but suggest that if government pursue population control programs, they must include more inclusive growth and greener economic growth. The next part of the discussion talks about women and reproductive rights. You know what? Women across the world continue to suffer from gender inequality, including child and forced marriage, gender-based violence, sex policies, as well as barriers to participation and employment. Women are often subject to these population measures. Reproductive rights supporters argue that if population control and economic development were to reach their goals, women must have control over whether they will have children or not and when they will have their progenies. Giving this power to the woman, they will be able to pursue their vocations. So ano nga bang maidulot nito? Siyempre, they will contribute to the economic growth and development. This correlation between families, fertility, and fortune has motivated countries with growing economies to introduce or strengthen the reproductive health laws and including abortion. So here in our country, we already have RA number 10354 or the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act of 2012 known as RH laws. It is a law guarantees universal and free access to all modern contraceptives for all Filipino citizens, including yung mga mahihirap na communities, pwede rin silang mag-avail nito. Also, meron ding mga pinovide na health centers ang government. Okay, so, what is the current world population? Gaano na ba karami ang tao ngayong 2022? According to statistics, today's global population has reached 7.9 billion and it is estimated to increase to 9.5 billion in 2050, then 11.2 billion by 2100. So, ayan, ganyan na tayo karami ngayon. Very alarming, right? As a matter of fact, the first billion population reached in 1800s. And just 200 years, we reached 7 billion. So, ganun kabilis dumami ang tao sa mundo natin. 95% of this population growth will happen in the developing countries, with demographers predicting that by the middle of the century, several countries will have tripled their population. Even if you try to assess the top 20 of the most populous country, majority of them kay gina-consider or part siya sa developing countries. So, the opposite naman is happening in the developed world, where populations remain steady in general but declining in some of the advanced countries like Japan and Singapore. So, ironically, na kung kinsa tong advance ang economy, advance ang technology, prosperous country na, pero sila pa talaga ang mas mababang population. To think na bisag daghan pa ang ilang population kay makaprovide gyapon sila sa ilang mga own needs. Pero lahi ang nakahitabo. So, sa developed worlds, sila ang mayaman, sila pa ang mas mababang population. Pero katong mga developing countries, sila ang mahirap, sila pa ang mas madaming tao. See? So, demographers predict that world will stabilize by 2050 to 9 billion, although they warn that feeding this population will be an immense challenge. I don't know kung buhi pa bataan pero let's see, aabangan natin. And questionable din kung enough ba ang food supply sa panahon na yan, di ba? The declining fertility and the existence of the young productive population, however, may not be enough to offset this concern over food security. The Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, warns that in order for the countries to mitigate the impact of population growth, food production must increase by 70%. Annual cereal production must rise to 3 billion tons from the current 2.1 billions. And yearly, meat production must go up to 200 million tons to reach to 470 million. So ito ang parang target natin sa food production. Dapat ma-meet natin ang target na to maintain the equilibrium of the food supply and population growth. What is the recommendation of FAO? The FAO recommends that countries should increase their investment in agriculture, craft long-term policies aimed at fighting poverty, and last but not the least, invest in research and development. Yes. Additional one. The UN body also suggests that countries develop a comprehensive social service program that includes food assistance, consistent delivery of health services, and education, especially for the poor. So may dinagdag pa dito ang UN. Sabi ng UN, if domestic production is not enough, it is essential for the country to import. So, of course, we cannot deny the fact that na ang isa ka country is dili kayang masustain na siya ra isa, so that's where globalizations come in. Meron tayong kailangan na wala sa atin at meron din tayong resources na dapat din nating i-export sa ibang bansa. The FAO enjoins government to keep their markets open. So, kasi i-allow yung trading o importation o exports. So, dapat bukas ang global market natin. And to eventually move towards a global trading system that is fair and competitive and that contributes to a dependable market for food. Okay? So, and the aforementioned are worthy recommendation, but nation states shall need the political will to push through these sweeping changes in population growth and food security. So, mauna ni siya karon. Kay kadtong tanan na mga suggestions and recommendations kay ma-useless na to siya kung ang imong gobyerno kay walay political will na himuon to or mag-push ato na mga recommendations, no? So, useless lang gihapon to siya. So, ayan. I think that will be all for this discussion. By the way, the book provided by Miss Join is the reference of our presentation. Yes. And again, this is group 4. Thank you for listening and stay safe. Bye.